Have you ever felt that sinking feeling in your stomach when someone you care about suddenly stops responding to you? That moment when the notifications disappear, your messages are left on read, and the person who occupied your thoughts seems to have vanished without explanation. What you're about to discover will forever change how you respond to being ignored by others. When someone ignores you, your first instinct is probably your attraction's worst enemy. Most people make the fatal mistake of chasing, bombarding with messages showing desperation, but there's a different path, one that not only preserves your dignity, but will, surprisingly, make the person who ignored you return of their own free will. And it all begins with understanding the power of emotional vacuum. Imagine this: silence can be your most powerful weapon. When someone ignores you and you respond with the same silence, you create a space that the other person will feel compelled to fill. As Neil Strauss said, attraction is not a choice, it's an emotional response to the absence of need. This phrase contains the first key to regaining control when you're being ignored. The first and most crucial response when someone ignores you is, don't chase. This seems counterintuitive because we've been taught that if we want something, we should go after it. But in human dynamics, especially romantic ones, the one who chases loses power. Neil Strauss explained it perfectly. The paradox of desire is that what we desperately pursue tends to move away, while what seems unattainable generates an irresistible attraction. Think about the last time someone was too available for you. Did you feel the same level of interest as you did for the person who maintained a certain mystery? Exactly. Mystery is a fundamental component of human attraction. When someone ignores you and you immediately send message after message asking what's wrong, you're communicating several things. First, that you don't have a life interesting enough to keep you busy. Second, that your emotional stability depends on their attention. And third, that you have no other options. None of these impressions make you seem attractive. Instead, practice what Strauss called calibrated indifference. This means showing slight disinterest without being hostile. If someone has ignored you, give them triple the time to respond when they finally communicate with you. If they took 3 days to answer you, wait 9. This isn't a childish game. It's applied psychology. There's a simple but powerful exercise you can do right now. Take your phone and look at the last message you sent to that person who's ignoring you. Now ask yourself, how many consecutive messages have you sent without getting a response? If it's more than one, you're making the most common mistake. Repeat this phrase: my value doesn't depend on anyone's response. I am complete on my own. This mantra will help you maintain perspective when anxiety from lack of response begins to take over. If you really want to master the art of attraction and make the person who ignored you come back to you, don't forget to hit the notification bell on this channel to receive more tips like this one. Your transformation is just beginning. And now, let's move on to the second crucial point that few people understand about other people's silence. When someone ignores you, it's not just about you. In fact, it rarely is completely about you. Neil Strauss discovered in his research that most times when someone disappears or ignores you, they're dealing with their own inner demons. It could be insecurities, fear of commitment, personal problems, or simply the feeling that things are moving too fast. Understanding this is liberating because it allows you to stop blaming yourself and start seeing the situation more objectively. The most effective response to silence is what I call strategic retreat. Instead of chasing or showing resentment, you take a step back and focus on your own growth. This not only benefits you personally, but creates a magnetic effect in the psychology of the person who ignored you. Have you ever wondered why people sometimes come back just when you've started to forget them? It's no coincidence. It's because they've perceived, even from a distance, that you're no longer spending your time thinking about them, and that awakens their curiosity. As Strauss explained, people want what they can't have and fear losing what they once took for granted. Imagine being ignored, and instead of obsessing, you use that time to improve some aspect of your life. You learn something new, improve your physical condition, expand your social circle. When that person returns, and most do, they'll find an improved version of you, someone who didn't fall apart in their absence but flourished. Here's a practical exercise. For each day that person ignores you, dedicate 1 hour to an activity that improves your life. It could be exercise, reading, a new hobby, or spending time with people who truly value your presence. This improvement algorithm guarantees that, regardless of the outcome with that specific person, you'll come out winning. Practice repeating this affirmation every morning. My attractiveness increases with every day I invest in myself. This mindset will transform your energy and, by extension, how others perceive you. It's crucial to understand that your response to someone who ignores you should not be motivated by revenge or manipulation. It should come from a genuine commitment to your own well-being. People can feel the difference between someone who pretends to be indifferent and someone who has truly found inner peace. Have you noticed how some people seem to naturally attract others' attention without trying? It's no coincidence. They've mastered the art of living centered on their own growth rather than external validation. And you can achieve this too. If this approach is resonating with you and you want to go deeper into these strategies, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Your support allows us to keep creating content that transforms lives. And now let's move on to the third fundamental point, the power of indirect communication when someone has ignored you. Neil Strauss revolutionized the world of social interactions by explaining that the most powerful communication isn't always the most direct. When someone ignores you and finally decides to return to your life, how you handle that reappearance will determine whether the pattern will continue or if you'll establish a new standard. Most people make the mistake of showing resentment or worse, acting as if nothing happened, thus communicating that it's okay to be treated with indifference. Both responses are counterproductive. The first makes you seem bitter, the second lacking in self-respect. The optimal strategy is what Strauss called acknowledgement with redirection. You casually acknowledge their return without drama and quickly redirect the conversation to something light and interesting. For example, "Hey, what a surprise. I was just thinking about that conversation we had about specific topic. By the way, I discovered this amazing place last weekend." This response is brilliant for several reasons. First, you don't ignore the fact that they disappeared, which would be inauthentic. Second, you don't give them the power to explain or apologize yet, which would create a dynamic where you need their justification. And third, you show that your life continued in an interesting way during their absence. Have you ever felt that almost irresistible need to ask, "Why did you disappear?" Or, "Did I do something wrong?" when someone returns after ignoring you? It's understandable, but counterproductive. The person who ignored you expects that reaction, is prepared for it. By not giving it to them, you create a cognitive imbalance that gives you back control of the interaction. Here's a practical exercise for you. Write down right now 3 interesting and light conversation topics you could use to redirect when that person returns. They could be recent experiences, interesting discoveries, or questions capable of generating stimulating conversation. Having these options prepared will allow you to respond calmly and naturally, rather than from anxiety. Neil Strauss discovered that the people who best handle social dynamics are those who maintain what he called an abundant reality. This means living with the certainty that there are multiple possibilities and potential connections in your life, not just this specific person who decided to ignore you. Repeat after me. I live in a world of abundance where valuable connections naturally flow to me. This mindset will not only make you more attractive to the person who ignored you, but to everyone who enters your life. You know what's really fascinating? When you master this form of communication, you don't just change how that specific person responds to you, but how your entire social circle perceives you. People intuitively notice those who have high standards about how they deserve to be treated. The key here isn't to pretend to be disinterested, but to genuinely develop a life so rich and fulfilling that someone's temporary absence, even if they're important to you, doesn't have the power to completely destabilize you. That authenticity is magnetic. If you feel this content is expanding your perspective on interpersonal relationships, consider subscribing to this channel. Each week, we share strategies based on advanced psychology to improve all your social interactions. And now let's move on to the fourth crucial point, the art of establishing subtle but unbreakable boundaries when someone returns after ignoring you. One of Neil Strauss's most valuable contributions to understanding social dynamics was his analysis of how clear boundaries paradoxically increase personal attractiveness. When someone has ignored you and decides to return, they have an unconscious expectation that you'll be available exactly on their terms. Breaking this expectation elegantly is possibly the most powerful response you can give. It's not about revenge or psychological games. It's about subtly communicating that you value your time and energy. In practice, this means being available, but not completely accessible. If they invite you out with little notice after having ignored you, an effective response would be, "I'd love to see you, but I have plans for today. How about next Tuesday?" This communicates genuine interest, but also that your schedule doesn't automatically adjust to their whims. Strauss called this attraction by selection. When you demonstrate that you have options and that you consciously choose to spend time with someone, that time becomes more valuable. It's the difference between being a default option and being a deliberate choice. Have you ever noticed how the most socially attractive people aren't necessarily the most available? It's not because they're playing games, it's because they genuinely value their time and are selective about who they share it with. Here's a powerful exercise. The next time someone who has ignored you wants to see you immediately, practice proposing a specific alternative instead of adjusting to their initial proposal. It may be uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to prioritizing others, but the result will transform the dynamics of the relationship. It's important to emphasize that this isn't manipulation. Manipulation stems from insecurity. Healthy boundaries stem from self-love. The difference is substantial, and people perceive it energetically. Neil Strauss emphasized that people don't treat you as you want to be treated. They treat you as you teach them they can treat you. Every time you accept being ignored and then being completely available without consequences, you're teaching a pattern of behavior that will likely repeat. Repeat this affirmation: "I teach others how to treat me with every interaction." This awareness will empower you to create more balanced dynamics in all your relationships. The fascinating thing about consistently establishing boundaries is that over time you'll naturally attract people who respect your time and energy from the beginning. It's as if the universe responds to the standards you set for yourself. And here's a truth that many relationship coaches fear telling you. Sometimes, the best response when someone repeatedly ignores you is being willing to lose them. That willingness isn't bitterness, it's self-love in its highest expression. If this message resonates with you and you feel it could help someone else in your life, share this video. Healthy relationships begin with people who understand these fundamental principles. And now we reach the fifth and possibly most transformative principle, the power to completely reinvent the dynamic when someone who ignored you returns to your life. This is possibly the best-kept secret that Neil Strauss discovered in his years of research on social psychology. When someone ignores you and then returns, there's a unique opportunity to completely reconfigure the relationship. Most waste this opportunity by returning to exactly the same previous dynamic, but you can do it differently. The calibrated reset technique consists of returning to the interaction with a slightly different energy. Not radically different, which would seem artificial, but subtly renewed. This creates in the other person the feeling that something has changed during their absence, awakening new curiosity. Strauss explained it this way: excessive familiarity diminishes desire, calibrated novelty revives it. That's why, after a period of separation, even the most stagnant relationships can experience renewed interest when one of the parties shows a subtle but noticeable change. What does this change consist of? It can be as simple as talking about new interests you've developed, showing a slightly different perspective on familiar topics, or even small changes in your appearance or way of expressing yourself. It's not about pretending to be another person, but about showing genuine facets of yourself that you may not have shared before. Imagine that during the time this person ignored you, you discovered a new passion, met interesting people, or had an important realization. Sharing this naturally, not as an attempt to impress, communicates that your world continued expanding in their absence. Here's a valuable exercise. Identify 3 genuine aspects of your life that have recently evolved. They could be new perspectives, developed skills, or significant experiences. These will be your anchor points to create that same but different feeling that is so magnetic. Neil Strauss discovered in his research that the human brain is programmed to look for patterns, and when it finds a positive anomaly in a familiar pattern, it feels irresistibly drawn to investigate further. That's why when someone who knows you returns and perceives something slightly different about you, their interest multiplies. Repeat this affirmation. With each experience, I grow and evolve, always offering an improved version of myself to the world. This mindset ensures that, regardless of whether that specific person values your evolution, you'll be constantly elevating your own value. The most powerful thing about this strategy is that it works even if the other person doesn't return. By focusing on your own growth and evolution, you naturally become more attractive to everyone who enters your life, creating an abundance effect that is the true key to personal power. Can you imagine how your life would change if every time someone temporarily moved away from you, they returned to find an improved version instead of someone stuck in waiting? That's the true power of responding to silence with growth. The most beautiful irony is that when you truly master these 5 responses to those who ignore you, you reach a point where other people's silence stops affecting you deeply. You become so centered on your own path that others' comings and goings become simple variations in the rhythm of your life, not emotional emergencies. If this approach is transforming your perspective on interpersonal relationships, make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any future content. We're creating a community of people who understand the deep psychology behind human interactions. Let's recap this transformative journey we've taken together. We've discovered that when someone ignores you, the most powerful response begins with strategic silence, followed by a renewed focus on your own growth. You learn to communicate indirectly when they return, to establish healthy boundaries that increase your value, and finally, to subtly reinvent the dynamic to awaken renewed interest. These principles that Neil Strauss discovered after years of research aren't simple tactics. They're a path to true personal power. When you stop reacting to others' behavior and start consciously creating your own responses, you regain control over your emotional experience. The greatest secret I've shared with you today is that true attraction doesn't come from techniques or strategies, but from becoming a person who doesn't need constant validation from others to feel complete. That self-sufficiency is the most powerful magnet for attracting balanced and satisfying relationships. I invite you to write this statement of intention in the comments right now. I choose to respond to silence with personal growth. My value doesn't diminish when someone decides to ignore me. This public affirmation will be the first step in your new way of approaching interpersonal relationships. Remember that every time someone ignores you, it's not a rejection. It's an invitation to raise your standards and demonstrate primarily to yourself that you deserve people who consistently value your presence in their lives. If this message has resonated with you, share it with someone who might need it today. Sometimes the right words at the right time can completely transform the trajectory of a life. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We're creating a community of people who understand that true power in relationships doesn't come from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery. Remember, when you respond to silence with personal evolution, you always win, regardless of who decides to return to your life.